Chapter 3 Whispers in the Night. The days in Athens stretched into weeks, each morning bringing new discussions at the Greek council. For Artemisia, the month had been both a test of patience and a crucible of growth. The intensity of the political debates surrounding the Persian threat was palpable, and though she had attended countless council meetings, she felt the weight of the decisions being made, or avoided, by the Greek leaders. Despite her initial excitement at being in Athens, a city filled with history and grandeur, Artemisia found herself increasingly on edge. Her father, King Lygdamis, was a steadying presence, but his mind seemed burdened by the political intricacies he navigated daily. And then there was Kairos, whose growing bond with Themistocles gnawed at her. Kairos and Themistocles had become fast friends. Themistocles, with his keen mind and sharp wit, was someone Kairos clearly admired. They spent hours together discussing strategies, naval tactics, and the future of Greece. Themistocles' presence commanded attention, and his charisma was undeniable. But there was something about him that Artemisia couldn't shake, a sense of manipulation lurking behind his charm. One afternoon, after yet another long council session, Artemisia found herself alone with Kairos in the palace gardens. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, but her mood was anything but serene. "You spend a lot of time with Themistocles," she remarked, trying to keep her tone casual. Kairos looked up from the scroll he was reading, a faint smile on his lips. "He's a fascinating man, Artemisia. His ideas are revolutionary. Athens will need someone like him if it's to survive what's coming." Artemisia frowned. "And you trust him completely?" "I don't. There's something calculating about him." Kairos chuckled, shaking his head. "You're being paranoid. Themistocles is a patriot. He wants what's best for Athens, and for Greece as a whole. You should try to learn from him instead of distrusting him." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't need to learn from him. I know enough to be wary of people who are too clever for their own good." Kairos sighed, clearly frustrated. "Artemisia, you need to let go of this suspicion. Not everyone is out to get you." She opened her mouth to argue further, but before she could respond, a figure appeared at the entrance to the gardens. It was Periander, the tyrant of Corinth, a man whose reputation for cruelty and cunning was well known. Periander was shorter than Kairos, but stocky and muscular, with curly dark hair and a face that could switch from a smile to a scowl in an instant. His eyes were cold, and his demeanor oozed arrogance. Periander approached them with a smirk, his eyes flicking dismissively over Artemisia before settling on Kairos. "Still playing at politics, I see. But do you really think there's a place for Caria in these matters? We're talking about the future of Greece here, not the whims of a minor kingdom." Artemisia bristled at his words. "Caria is more than capable of holding its own, Periander, and you would do well to remember that." Periander's smirk widened. "Oh, I'm well aware of Caria's capabilities. A small, insignificant kingdom caught between the might of Persia and the ambition of Greece. Tell me, Artemisia, what will you do when the Persians come for you? Will you run to Athens for protection, or will you sell yourself to the highest bidder?" The words cut deep, and before she knew it, Artemisia's hand was on her sword hilt. "Watch your tongue, Periander, or I'll cut it out." Periander's eyes glinted with amusement. "Temper, temper, it's unbecoming of a lady." The situation escalated in an instant. Artemisia drew her sword, and Periander, with a sneer, did the same. The clash of steel echoed through the gardens as they engaged in a furious duel. Artemisia's movements were swift and precise, driven by a lifetime of training and fueled by her anger. Periander was no slouch, though, and he met her strikes with equal ferocity. The fight was intense, with both combatants trading blows and insults. Periander's arrogance was matched by Artemisia's determination, and for a moment it seemed like neither would back down. But just as Artemisia was about to deliver a decisive strike, a voice boomed through the gardens. "Enough!" Themistocles strode forward, his face a mask of stern authority. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight. This is neither the time nor the place for such petty squabbles. Artemisia froze, her sword inches from Periander's chest. Periander, too, hesitated, his eyes flicking between Artemisia and Themistocles. Themistocles continued, his tone even. We are here to discuss the future of Greece, not to settle personal vendettas. Lower your weapons, both of you. With a frustrated growl, Artemisia sheathed her sword. Periander did the same, though his smirk had returned, as if he had somehow won by provoking her. This isn't over, Artemisia muttered under her breath, glaring at Periander. Themistocles caught her eye, his expression unreadable. Artemisia, a true leader knows when to fight and when to restrain themselves. Learn this lesson, or it will cost you dearly. She clenched her fists, resisting the urge to argue. Instead, she turned and stormed out of the garden, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and frustration. How dare Periander insult her and Caria, and how dare Themistocles lecture her as if she were a child? That evening, as the shadows lengthened across Athens, Artemisia found herself alone in her chamber, her mind racing with the day's events. The altercation with Periander had left her shaken, not because of the fight itself, but because of the implications. She was beginning to see just how dangerous the world of politics could be. Kairos visited her later, his expression one of concern. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her heart wasn't in it. "I'm fine, just tired." Kairos studied her for a moment before speaking. "Look, I know you don't trust Themistocles, but he did the right thing today. You need to be more careful, Artemisia. We're not in Caria anymore." "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "but it's hard to trust anyone here." Kairos sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Artemisia. We're in this together." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was concern and determination. Kairos was loyal, that much was clear, but his growing bond with Themistocles worried her more than she cared to admit. As the days passed, the tension in Athens grew thicker. The council's debates continued, with no clear resolution in sight. The fear of Persia loomed large, but so too did the internal conflicts between the city-states. It was clear that unity was fragile, and any wrong move could shatter it completely. On the penultimate evening of their stay, Artemisia was restless. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind refusing to quiet. Something was bothering her, a nagging feeling that she couldn't shake. She finally gave in to her instincts and slipped out of bed. The palace was quiet, the corridors empty as she made her way through the shadowed halls. She'd heard whispers earlier in the day, servants speaking in hushed tones about a late-night meeting between her father and Cleisthenes. Driven by curiosity and a sense of duty, Artemisia followed the sounds of distant voices. They led her to a small, dimly lit chamber where she could just make out the figures of her father and Cleisthenes in deep conversation. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear their words. "You must see reason, Lygdamis," Cleisthenes was saying, his tone insistent. "The Persians are a threat to all of Greece. If you do not align with us now, you will be seen as an enemy. You must denounce Darius and pledge your loyalty to the Greek cause." Lygdamis's voice was low, filled with hesitation. "Cleisthenes, you know the position I'm in. Caria is a vassal of Persia. To denounce Darius is to invite destruction upon my people." Cleisthenes leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "And to do nothing is to invite the wrath of Greece. You are at a crossroads, Lygdamis. Choose wisely." There was a long pause before Cleisthenes continued, his tone shifting to something more personal. "There is also the matter of your succession. Without a male heir, your position is precarious. You must either remarry and produce a son, or find a suitable husband for Artemisia. A strong alliance could secure your future and hers." Artemisia's blood ran cold at the suggestion. The thought of being used as a political pawn, married off to secure an alliance, was abhorrent to her. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Lygdamis's voice was soft, almost resigned. "I will consider your words, Cleisthenes. But know this, I will not be pressured into a decision that could destroy my kingdom or my family." Cleisthenes nodded, his expression unreadable. "I trust you will make the right choice, my friend." As the conversation ended, Artemisia felt a hand on her shoulder. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, only to find Kimon standing there, his expression grave. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, his tone a mixture of concern and admonishment. I needed to know what they were discussing," Artemisia replied, her voice shaky. Kimon's eyes softened slightly. "You should not be here, Artemisia. This is not your burden to bear." She shook her head, her resolve hardening. "It is my burden, Kimon. My father's decisions affect my future too." Kimon sighed, his expression conflicted. "I understand, but you must be careful. These are dangerous times, and you cannot afford to act rashly." Artemisia nodded, though her mind was already racing with thoughts of what she had overheard. The political games being played in Athens were treacherous, and she was beginning to see just how deep the currents ran. As they quietly made their way back to her chamber, Artemisia couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The choices her father made in the coming days would shape not only Caria's future, but her own as well. And in the quiet of the night, with the shadows of Athens closing in around her, Artemisia vowed that she would not be a passive player in this game. She would fight for her future, for her people, and for her right to choose her own path, even if it meant defying the very leaders she was supposed to follow.